Hello, and welcome to Art with Mrs. Torres. Today we're going to be focusing on an American pop artist named Jim Dine, best known for painting and sculpting beautiful heart paintings. Now, if you look at some of the different ones that he has done, you will see they're all different. Every style of painting and sculpting that he created, there's still a heart, but there's something unique and different about each one. So today we are going to be taking that idea and making our own creative style of Jim Dine heart painting. So join me, we're going to have fun. Let's get ready to do our Jim Dine Valentine painting. Today we are going to be working with watercolors, and we're also going to be working with either a black colored pencil for the detail work, or if you have an extra fine point marker, this would work as well. So either a black colored pencil or an extra fine point marker. The other item you're going to need is either a black oil pastel, which I would recommend, but if you don't have it, a black crayon will work as well. Finally, you're going to need a paintbrush and some watercolors, a bowl of water, a pair of scissors, and a glue stick. So go ahead and gather up your watercolor paper and all these items, and then meet me back here and we'll get ready to start. Welcome back. Let's get ready to take our watercolor paper. We're going to be putting it horizontal on our desk and folding it in half. So I'm going to be bending it this direction all the way over, holding my hand steady. And then I'm going to take my finger, while these two fingers hold it steady, and pop it right down the middle. Once it pops right here on the edge, it will be easy for you to slide your finger up and down to get a nice clean fold. When you're finished, open it up, and you're going to take a pair of scissors and cut it right down the middle. Now that we've cut our paper in half, we're going to get ready to draw our heart. We're going to be drawing a heart on one half of the paper, and then we're going to be drawing our background on the other half. So let's begin by drawing our heart. I'm going to be taking my pencil. Now you want to make sure that your pencil is not sharp. If your pencil is sharp, you're going to want to take a scratched piece of paper and scribble it onto the scratched piece of paper. You don't want to have a sharp point because it will cut the paper. We're going to draw a very light line right down the middle. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. We're going to be using this line to help us draw our heart. Then we're going to erase the line later. This is just the way that I draw a heart so that it helps me to have a pretty balanced or symmetrical heart. So what I'm going to do from here is I want to start below the top of the paper, plus I want to make sure my heart is smaller so that it fits nicely on my background. So I don't want to use up this whole piece of paper. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is starting from the middle point here, I'm going to arch a curve up, around, and then back down, and I'm going to make sure I stop before the bottom of the paper. And once I've done that, I'm going to create the same on the other side, going up, around, and back down. Now when you are sketching, you're not drawing really dark, because that way, if you make a mistake, it's easy to erase. So when I do this, I can look and see that my points have landed, and I also have a curve. Now the way to avoid a jelly bean heart is by making sure that you always come up first. You're going to go up and around and then back down. Once you've finished creating your heart, you can go in with your magical eraser and you can erase a line in the center. That line is just there to help you make a more symmetrical heart when you're drawing it. When you're finished, you're going to trace over your heart using either a black oil pastel or a black crayon. So either one that you have, you're going to use to trace over it. I'm going to be using my oil pastel. A black crayon will also work just fine. I like to work with the oil pastel only because you can smudge it a little bit more. What we're going to be doing later is rubbing our finger to kind of smudge the black to make this illusion of this very old, kind of dusty, dirty heart. Once you've finished tracing your heart, then we're going to be taking our watercolor paint and we're going to be watercoloring a coat of red on top of our heart. I'm going to be taking my paintbrush and my water, and I'm going to be cleaning my brush first and adding a few drops of water to my red. Remember, we never paint with the paint that's inside the watercolor tub. What we're working with is the water that floats on top. So I'm very lightly going to scrub very gently the very top of that to kind of mix that water in. And then I'm going to take my brush and paint my heart. Now we are going to be cutting our heart out, so it is okay if you paint outside of your crayon or oil pastel lines. We'll be cutting it out once it dries. We don't want to leave any puddles, so I'm just going to keep moving my brush and then just kind of pulling my paint across. And you're going to want to have your heart, if you can, a little bit lighter in the middle and a little bit darker on the edges. So we're kind of matching the style that he painted. So as I'm doing my heart, I'm going to put a little bit darker red around the sides, which just means I'm adding one more coat. You notice I don't have any big puddles. If you notice in his painting, he also has some smudgy coats of black. Now you could go in and do this with your paintbrush right now. If you want to add a tiny bit of black water on top of the red, you can do that around the edge like this. Or you can wait and we can get the same effect later using an oil pastel and smudging it. So see what I'm doing? I'm just kind of running my brush with a tiny bit of black around the sides. And then to make that kind of smeary effect, I'm going to take a little bit of that black and run it back and forth with my brush. Just kind of wiggle it like this. I'm going to let my painting dry, and then I'm going to pick it up a little bit later, and we'll do some more fun things with it, okay? So let's take our painting. We're going to place it off to the side to dry. Now we're going to work on creating our background for our painting. The painting is called Little Heart in the Landscape. So now we're going to be creating a landscape. So I'm going to use my other half of my white paper that we had put aside earlier. While our heart dries, we're going to work on the background. So if I look at his painting, I see there are trees in the background, birch trees in the background, and there's some fun flowers in the foreground. If you actually look at his original painting, you can see even closer the detail that he did. There's also some fun smudges that I can't wait to go in with my paint and my oil pastel or crayon later and do that as well. We're going to start to create our landscape now. So this is going to be working no more with our paint. We're going to now be working with our fine point marker or black colored pencil. Now I'm going to show you what the method looks like with both, because you might have both and you might want to decide which one you want to work with. So in working with our black colored pencil, as long as your pencil has a little bit of a point on it, you can go in and draw. Let's start with one of those birch trees. So I can take my pencil and draw a line coming up. I'm going to draw another line coming up. And then I'm going to draw a smaller branch coming off to the side. And a few baby branches. So the baby branches are going to always be smaller than the branch that they come from. And then the main branch or the main trunk of the tree is always going to be a little bit wider than the branch. Once I'm finished with that, I'm going to go in and to make it look like a birch tree, I'm going to come in and add a few little dashes on the side. And then I'm going to add another branch coming off to the side with a few small branches from there. As you're making these, you can do as many branches as you'd like. And we're going to start to fill in the background with these birch trees. Now, we're not going to do them the whole way across. I'm just going to be drawing a few. This one I'm going to be making coming behind. So this one's kind of tilting off to the side. As you're making your birch trees, make sure that you're pressing down with your colored pencils so they all have the same darkness with your pencil line. In a minute, I'm going to switch over and I'll show you what it looks like with the colored, not with the colored pencil, I'm sorry, with the fine point marker. So let's try it now with a fine point marker and you'll see I get the same effect, same fine line. It might look slightly different. Now, the trick to working with a fine point marker is you want to make sure you're holding it straight up and down. And you're going to want to wiggle it on your paper until the ink starts to flow. If you hold it sideways, it's never going to draw. You always want to hold it straight up and down. You never want to tap down on it. You want to just very lightly wiggle it until the ink starts to flow. Holding it straight up and down, I'm going to start to create now another birch tree. Now you'll notice the fine point marker, the line is going to be slightly darker. And you'll notice it doesn't have quite as much of a loose feel to it. It's a little bit stiffer, the line. But you still can get the same effect. So I'm seeing in that picture, there are also some blades of grass. It looks like he drew underneath. So I'm going to brush those in. And I'm going to continue making a thinner branch that comes off the side. So I'm going to just keep creating a few more birch trees, following the same method I used before, adding a few extra little lines on the sides, making some random skinny little branches that come behind, and then don't forget those little finger branches. So as we're looking at his work, another thing that you're going to notice is that he's got some smudges in his picture, right? So we're going to get ready, once we're done, making as many branches and trees in the distance as you want. We'll put some smudges in a little bit later using our crayon and oil pastel. Now, since these are in the distance, we don't want to spend a lot of time making them really dark. We want to spend more time creating the ones that are in the foreground. So if you notice, in the left-hand side of his picture, he has some flowers coming up from the bottom. So I'm looking at that flower, and it kind of reminds me of the truffula trees from the Dr. Seuss pictures. So I'm going to go in and make one of these little poppy flowers. It's kind of like a little dandelion that you blow on too, right? So it reminds me of those truffula trees. So I'm going to take my pencil. You could also do the same effect using your extra fine point marker. And I'm just going to make some little fluffy flowers. I'm going to make this one kind of coming in the distance in the background, so I'll make it look maybe a little bit smaller. Now you don't have to copy exactly what he did. You could create whatever kind of flowers you would like in your picture. And then do you notice he's got some really tall ones in the very background? So I'm going to shoot a big tall one up here toward the top of the page. Now this one looks a little different. Looks like the letter U. And a little top. It looks like it's got, kind of looks like an umbrella upside down. There we go. And I can't tell because it's so messy up at the top of that flower. So I'm just going to kind of scribble some little puffs up on top of it. So go ahead now and just create a few more flowers, however you want those flowers to be. You can copy what I'm doing, or you can create your own style. And then when we're all finished creating our background, we're going to scribble. And I mean scribble. We're going to really scribble. We're going to scribble, scrabble right over these beautiful drawings. I'm going to also create a larger tree. Do you see that larger tree over to the right of that flower? There's another hidden tree over here. And this may or may not show up once we glue our heart down. We'll have to wait and see. So I'm going to create my little, kind of looks like the letter Y. And it looks like he makes it kind of darker on one side. So I'm going to kind of do the same thing. And then it looks like the branches just kind of fade away. It's almost like he didn't complete it. That's kind of fun. So as you can tell, this style of art, this pop art style, is very loose and free. You don't have to worry about it being perfect. So look at all the scribble scrabbles that he does on top of the work that he just finished. In the lower section down here, it looks like he's got another tree. Now this one to me kind of looks more like a pine tree. So it's a big, tall trunk of a tree. It's not very thick. And then it's got bigger branches. This kind of reminds me of a Christmas tree. And then those branches, I'm going to make them super skinny. Those branches have little finger branches shooting off the sides. When you're all finished creating as many trees as you like, it's time to scribble. So we can scribble with a couple different tools. We can use our pencil. We can use our colored pencil. We could use our Sharpie marker. We could color and scribble with a crayon. So do you notice that around the edges of the paper, he's got some smudges. He's got it darker around all of the edges too. So the first thing I'm going to do, you could use a crayon or your oil pastels. I think I'm going to go in with my oil pastel, and I'm just going to start to put a little black around the edge. Now, if you're using a crayon, it'll work just as good. The only reason I'm using oil pastel, number one, I have it here, and number two, I can smudge it with my finger. But don't worry, you'll get the same effect even if you use a crayon. You just maybe won't be able to smudge it with your finger. So I'm darkening the edge, and then I'm just going to take my finger and just taking the tip of my finger and smudging it. So whenever I'm painting, I always have a napkin near me, and since we painted today, you might have a napkin near you. You can use your napkin for cleaning your finger. And so if it's really bothering you that you have a dirty finger, as we go along, you can always clean it. So there, I just kind of smudged the edges of my paper to make it look like his picture. And then if you notice in his actual painting, it's also smudged a little bit too. We'll be cutting out our heart and gluing it down, and then we're going to be smudging around that painting a little bit later. But first, let's do some scribbles. So looking over at this section, oh my goodness, it just looks like he just got frustrated while he was painting, and he just started taking his pencil and scribbling. So I'm going to kind of do that too. Also looks like he kind of made some marks like tic-tac-toe almost in some of the areas, doesn't it? So I'm going to go over here and scribble this direction. And then down at the bottom, do you notice at the bottom, he's got a lot of scribbles at the bottom as well. So over here on this side, I'm going to take my pencil now and I'm going to color that part just very scribbly. pretty dark in this section too, isn't it? Now, at any place you want to add more detail, you can go back in with your marker, or you can go back in with your colored pencil. If you kind of colored over something and you can't see all of the tree anymore, you can just make it a little bit darker with your marker or your colored pencil. But remember, your heart is going to be over it right here. Then I also see that he looks almost like he spilled some paint. Maybe he splattered some paint. So here's another example of just having an opportunity to get creative. You could go in with your paintbrush. Now, you don't have to do this. Remember, everything I'm showing you are just ideas. So you could go in with your paintbrush. You could put some more black paint on your brush. And we could start to do some smudges with our black paint. So we could go in like this and smudge it with our finger. Do you see how he has some dark areas in his picture? You can water it down to spread it out a little bit more. In some of the places, it looks almost like he's got some fingerprints too, or maybe he was working and he picked up his painting and he moved it across the room, or maybe he had to move it because it was time for lunch and he had to move his painting off of the table, and it almost looks like he got a fingerprint. So I'm going to leave a fingerprint on mine. Why not? When you're all finished and you think you've got enough. Oh, I forgot about the splatters. Let's do some splatters. Okay, well, if you want to. So I'm going to dip my brush in the paint, and I'm going to make sure that that paint is very watery. So I'm going to add a little bit more water to my black paint. And then I see in the upper left-hand corner, it kind of looks like he has some drips. So before I do drips, I always tap my brush once on the napkin just so it's not too much paint coming off. And then I'm going to hold my brush pointing down. And I'm going to just take my pencil and kind of tap. So I'm holding my brush. I'm going to tap it once on my napkin, get rid of that first big glob. And then who knew you could take watercolors and do so many different unique things in one painting with them, right? We did fingerprints, we smeared it, and now we're tapping. When you're all finished and you think it's got enough texture in it, we're going to go over and we're going to cut our heart out. So I'm going to move this off to the side with my little dirty fingers. By the way, you can dip your fingers in the water and then wipe them off on your napkin if they're really bothering you. And don't worry, it will come out when you wash your hands. Let's get ready to cut out our heart now. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to go in and carefully cut around my heart. So go ahead and cut your heart out. And remember, I outlined mine with a black oil pastel. So I will be adding even more oil pastel to the sides of it later once I glue it down. And then I'm going to smudge my oil pastel one more time. Now, black crayon will not give you the same look of smudging, but you can get the same idea by just taking your crayon and brushing it over the picture when we're done. I'll show you when we're all finished. Okay, so I cut out my heart. Now I'm going to take my heart. Now you don't want to set it onto your painting when you're flipping it over. You want to flip it over onto your work surface. And then I'm going to be adding a coat of glue to the back. Remember, when you're using your glue stick, that you always want to twist it down before you put it away. That way it keeps the sides clean. And I'm going to add a nice coat of glue to the back. Make an X through the middle. Kind of get it right up to the edge. Twist it down, close it up. And take my heart and glue it on top of my painting. So once I place it in the center, I'm kind of deciding where I want it. I want to have enough room at the top and the bottom. Press it down so it sticks. Sometimes it might be lifting up on one area or the other. So you can just kind of hold it down like this and then lift your hands up. If it's still popping up, You can always lift up the edge and put a little bit of glue on the back. Don't put it on the watercolor background. You want to lift up and put it on the back like this. So especially with watercolor paper, it takes a little bit more glue than if you were gluing down a thin piece of paper. All right, let's get ready to re-outline our picture so it's a little bit darker around the sides, the way his work is. So I'm going to take my oil pastel one more time and go right around the edge, right on the edge of that cut paper. One more time. And if you're using a crayon, you can do the same thing with a crayon. Now, if you do have oil pastel, what you can do is now smudge it. So I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to slowly pull it away from the heart. Now, you can darken it if you want to make it a little bit more heavy. See, I'm getting that kind of cool, radiating smudge from the sides. And then you can go in and add a little bit more texture to the center and the sides of the heart. So he's got a few little scrabbles inside of it. Now, let me show you with a crayon, the effect that you get with a crayon. The crayon's going to work the same way. It's just going to be slightly lighter. So I can still get a really wonderful scrabble effect with the crayon. So it's not that different. It's just that the oil pastel can smudge and make kind of these dirty smudges to look more like his artwork, where the black crayon, you're not going to be able to smudge. It doesn't smudge, but it still makes very similar effects. So I'm going to do this right side with my crayon, just so you can see it. And then I'm going to do the left side of my picture with the oil pastel. Now, you don't need to do that for your picture. I'm just showing you the different mediums and how they work. Well, I hope you had fun today learning how to make a Jim Dine inspired painting. I had fun. This painting was inspired by his work, which was called Little Heart in the Forest. I will see you for our next art lesson. Have a great day. Bye.